Hi, my name is Brian Anderson, and today we're going to talk about elevating emotional IQ through gratitude. And since this is for students and teachers and parents, we're going to start off with a fun little math example that will show us the pure gratitude that we should all feel. It's hard to focus on this at all times, but the joy and the grace and the gift of this next breath. So we all have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 grandparents, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1,000. We just went back 10 generations. At 25 years a generation, that would be 250 years. So to make it easy for everybody, we'll say roughly to the year 1750, we all have 1,000 grandparents. 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000, 32,000, 64, 128, 256, 512,000, a million. We just went back 20 generations, roughly to the year 1500. We all have a million grandparents dating back roughly to the year 1500. One more time. 2 million, 4 million, 8, 16, 32, 64, 120, 256, 512 million, a billion. Dating back to the year 1250, we all have a billion grandparents. One more generation, the year 1225, a billion grandmothers and a billion grandfathers. And if any one of those sets of billion relationships didn't turn out perfectly, you wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be here. If arguments hadn't been resolved out of a billion relationships to save the relationships, we wouldn't be here. If arguments didn't get resolved, so our ancestral grandmother in a billion relationships went a different direction and actually met our ancestral grandfather, we wouldn't be here. All the tragedies and disasters, as horrible as they were for our ancestry at the time, if those didn't happen and change the course of lives, we wouldn't be here. And if we just go back a couple more generations, we were at 2 billion, 4 billion, 8 billion. Now we're at as many people as are on Earth. So if they were all of, age of, 20s and 30s or whatever you want to say, if everybody on Earth was of that age, 4 billion relationships would have to work out perfectly, every single relationship on Earth. And now we're at roughly the year 1175, 33 generations. If those relationships didn't work out perfectly in all those relationships, we wouldn't be here. And we went back just, 33 generations or so. And Homo sapiens in the textbooks, in the science textbooks in schools, say modern Homo sapiens are 150,000 years old. So that's 6,000 generations at 25 years a generation. And we only went back 33. So many things had to work out so perfectly. And if we can remember these things a little bit more often through the course of the day, and I'll bring up several other somewhat mind-blowing examples. If we can get ourselves into a higher state more consistently, if we're a youngster in school, then all the difficulties that we're having, all the challenges, if we're in a higher state of mind, in part through gratitude, we're more likely to handle those difficulties a little bit better. Same with parents, same with teachers. So the more that we can introduce additional levels of gratitude into our lives on a daily basis, so we can be as happy as we can possibly be in the moment as many times during the course of the day as we can, then we are going to get ourselves to a place where we're going to raise our emotional IQ. And so that was obviously from the gratitude physical standpoint. Now we're going to shift gears to what great minds have been saying through the course of the generations and the centuries and the millennia, where we've had great minds. It doesn't matter which spirituality it is. We're not getting specific at all here. It doesn't matter which one. They all mention this thing called eternity. Okay? And in the science textbooks, it also says that the universe is 13.8 billion years old. And so if these great minds through the course of time are right in regards to this eternity thing, and even if they're not, and I think they are, but even if they're not, and we believe that they are, It's very powerful what we believe. If we believe that they are, and we've got this 13.8 billion year segment that we're in right now, then this is just the first 13.8 billion year segment. And then there's another one, and then there's another one, and then there's another one. And the point of this is that whatever difficulty any of us may be going through at any one particular point in time, it is such a tiny sliver relative to all that we are. We are so much more than any difficulty that we may have. Now, with this scenario of these great minds talking about this eternity thing, well, something seemingly had to create everything, because in the science textbooks, it says the universe is 13.8 billion years old, but science also says the law of conservation of energy says that matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed. They only change form. So science has a little bit of a difficulty there, because you can't make something out of nothing. That's what science has a law about. So that speck that had all matter and energy in it, it had to get there somewhere, and that's when it shifts over to those other great minds. And however that got there, all right, that is an incredibly big deal. However that got there. And that to me is like the elephant dancing across the night sky in terms of another scenario where we can just add so much additional gratitude, because how can there be, science says you can't make something out of nothing. But here we are in this universe that just runs so perfectly, made out of strings perhaps, and quarks, and electrons, and neutrons, and protons, and all these different things that fit together perfectly to create the, how many cells they say? Some say the trillions, they say 50 trillion, 35 trillion, right in there, the number of cells. All these things coming together, DNA is just so perfectly designed just for us to get a chance to take this breath. So there's so many incredible things that are going on. Now, with those great minds that talk about the spirituality side, if there's a soul behind everything, and that's what those great minds talk about, if that's the case, then there were infinite choices of a soul to create for the student that we're referencing today, or the teacher, or the parents. There are infinite choices for souls to be created, infinite choices. Yet, the student we're talking about today, their soul was created to be a part of this body, and that soul is eternal. That is so powerful, because if a focused moment was taken to create my soul, and the student's soul, and your soul, and the teacher's soul, and the parent's soul, then what a magnificent gift of a soul for that focused moment. We were in that moment that our soul was created. We were given the gift of eternity, all right? That's a really, really, really big deal, because I have a model that I created with words that you've heard before, but fear, ego, and worthiness, okay? Those are, whenever we take an action that we don't like what we did, it's because of fear, ego, or worthiness. Sometimes we just want to get away from that stuff, so distraction can be another scenario, and physical pain, okay? But generally, when there's an action that we don't like the way that we took it, it was fear, ego, and worthiness. Well, if our soul was created and we were given the gift of eternity, then that gift has infinite value. And I think the biggest issue that the majority of students and teachers and parents have are worthiness issues. Is if we just get down to it, and I never thought about this. I traveled the country, all 50 states, was in the national news on some things, but I never just ever thought about the word worthiness. But now that I'm a little bit older and I've thought about things a little more, worthiness issues about us not being enough are the number one thing that slow us down. And we have different ways to distract ourselves from the worthiness issues. We call it different things, but it's generally worthiness. But if we realize that we were given the gift of eternity, and that has infinite value, then if we realize and we think daily, multiple times per day, that we have infinite value, okay, and that gets me the goosebumps just thinking about it and saying it right there, then that means that dispels the worthiness issues. So one of the three main issues we have is worthiness. And we dispel that by realizing that we are eternal. Therefore, we have infinity. We've been given the gift of eternity. And if that's the case, then we have infinite value. There's nothing more valuable that can be created than a soul. and we were given the gift of a soul. Therefore, worthiness issues, if we focus on that enough and get into our brain, then we can resolve and take care of the worthiness issues. All right? If we're eternal, which we are, then we are, by definition, invincible. All right? So we talked about fear issues. Well, if we realize that we're invincible, that anything that we do now is just a sliver of this first 13.8 billion year segment, then the next one, then the next one, then we realize we're invincible, then the fear goes away. You can't have fear and invincibility at the same time. So if you realize in a safe manner, we don't want to be jumping off any high levels of cliffs or anything, but if we realize in an intelligent way that we truly are invincible because we're eternal, therefore the fear is gone. So now fear and worthiness issues are gone. And then the other scenario is sometimes we cover up the worthiness issues with ego. And I've just created a model for that where everything goes back, even in the textbooks when we talked about the Big Bang and 13.8 billion years ago. Well, even if we don't include the spiritual side, all matter and energy was in a single point. It's smaller than a quark, smaller than a molecule, smaller than an atom. So we all were one. Our ancestry, which I just went into a second ago, our ancestry, if you bring it back 13.8 billion years, we all are one. We all are connected. And by realizing that we're all connected consistently on a regular basis, it's not easy. It takes a lot of practice. But by doing that on a daily, consistent basis, we realize that we are one. If we feel that level of connection, and love will obviously be a part of that, then when we can recognize and we want to improve and we want to get past the ego issues, then we can realize that we are all connected. And if we're all connected, then that gets us past the ego issues, because ego is being better, trying to pretend like we're better than somebody else. But when we realize that we're all connected, then that dispels ego. So fear, ego, and worthiness go by the wayside. And additionally, I've created a model that I won't get into here, but even on the spirituality side, I kind of see it as similar to the Big Bang, where on the physical side, but on the spiritual side, how everything's connected there as well. And I've got some imagery in my brain just to create it so I can see it. And again, would we rather be happy or would we rather be right? So I create models, and if they're wrong, I don't want to have other people be wrong and follow the wrong models. But for me personally, I'd rather be happy. And therefore, I create models, including spirituality and everything being connected originally. So therefore, again, I get past the ego issues, hopefully much more often, because I feel the sense of connection with everything and everyone, and even the nature that's all around us, because I see on a consistent basis with my brain, which is based in science, that everything was one. Therefore, we share this connectedness. Therefore, that can get us past the ego. So by focusing on these different levels, including fear, ego, and worthiness, and the ways to counteract those with fear, if we're eternal, we're invincible, the fear goes away. The ego, if we're all connected, we can get beyond the ego because we realize we're just going against ourselves. And the worthiness, when we realize that our soul, and the example of the physical side of our ancestry, when we realize, though, specifically that we were gifted the gift of an eternal soul, and that's got infinite value, then the worthiness issues can step to the side as well and take away fear, ego, and worthiness by daily practice, which raises our emotional IQ through the daily practice of gratitude.